everybody, this is Edwin the Magic Engineer, and I'm finally back again with yet another mid-range expense deck, and this is for the old school format. And as many of you are familiar with, I did a 5-video series called the Budget Deck series for old school, where I took one of each color and I built a budget old school deck that is pretty decently affordable and very competitive in the old school format. And something that I wanted to get to for a long time was doing the mid-expense kind of tier version of decks. And I did one already. It was a red-white deck, and it was a pretty decent deck. And these take a little longer to create. These videos do, because I actually have to build the decks, refine them, playtest them, and get them all set up before I actually show them. And so I've got the deck right here, and it is red-black. And so as you can see, it is a Disco Troll deck, which is kind of exciting. So Disco Troll, it basically comes down to two main cards as being like the reason for the name in it. You've got all these trolls, like, here, I'm going to get it positioned here so everyone can see it. You've got the Sedge Trolls, which are really good, because the Sedge Trolls, they get +1/+1 when you have a swamp in play, so they become a 3/3 for 3 mana, which is great in old school format. And they can actually regenerate for a black as well. So those are just two fantastic abilities. And you've got the Uthden Troll over here as well, who's just a 2/2 troll that regenerates. But the reason why this is called Disco Troll is because of these cards here, because the deck packs Nevinrral's disc. And Nevinrral's disc, here, I'll find an English one here for you. This destroys basically everything in play but lands and well, I guess, it doesn't kill planeswalkers and stuff like that, but you don't care about that in old school. So everything but lands is what this basically blows up. It blows up creatures and artifacts and enchantments. And so for many decks, especially like black and red, it's one of your only ways of dealing with enchantments that actually hit the table. But against control decks, it's devastating because the Nevinrral's disc blows up like all of their mana pieces and card draw pieces and stuff like that. So that's why you need the regenerators, though, because if you're going to be blowing everything up, then you need the ability to actually keep your creatures on the table as you've been blowing them up. So I wanted to pick this deck because it's a good starting spot for a mid-range deck, because you can get a deck like this working without all those expensive cards. So you've got the trolls. We've already shown those. That's 8 creatures. I did put 2 Hypnotic Specters in the deck, and they do blow up with the discs, yes. But the thing is, if you have a Hypnotic Specter, and he's actually swinging and getting through, the card disadvantage he's giving your opponents is so good that oftentimes you're perfectly fine with leaving that disc in play and just beating them with it, right? So the Hypnotic Specter, I needed another creature slot, and for a while I had the Rook Eggs in there. And Rook Egg is like a 0/3 creature that does nothing. And then as soon as he gets blown up, you get a 4/4 flyer. And so that's kind of great after the disc blows up. But in my playtesting, I found that the Rook Egg just wasn't as effective as the Hypnotic Specter would actually be. But the 4 Specters really started to push against the disc theory, because then I was constantly in a spot where I didn't want to blow my disc. And so just 2 Specters I found to be a really good balance for that. So I've got the Uthden Trolls and the Sedge Trolls and the Hypnotic Specter. Sorry, I moved my mocks there. Straighten that out. I like having these little pretty shinies. Now, another thing about many of these discs, you're already kind of going for mana destruction, because you've already decided to hit their all their artifact mana, and that really damages a lot of old school decks that rely heavily on their artifact mana. And so if you just go with that strategy and you go ahead and blow up their lands as well, you can really keep the pressure on them. So I've got 4 Stone Rains, and I've got 4 Sinkholes that I put into the deck as well. And so I'm blowing up all their permanents. I'm eliminating their mana, which really hurts their ability to recover after a disc actually goes out. And the Stone Rains, of course, people always ask, like, well, but I can't afford beta. How's that a budget deck if you got beta Stone Rains, things like that? So again, for anyone who's not familiar, 4th edition, Chronicles, all that stuff, which are white border versions, those are all legal for old school. So you can just go get your 4th edition Stone Rains, and they wouldn't probably cost more than 20 cents each, if even that, right? There's no expense to those whatsoever. The Sinkholes will cost you a little bit more since they were only Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, but Unlimited ones will still, I think, even today go for like $10 or less or something like that at times. So anyways, so you got all the land destruction. Now, the deck also has a lot of removal, and this is where a lot of the skill comes down. Like, you know, when I get the lightning bolts, I don't just throw the bolts at their face like immediately. I wait for the most opportune moments to actually do a bolt. I was testing this deck against my Rug Crazies, or Ugg Crazies deck, because there's no more red. It's just blue and green. And the bolts were just so huge because as soon as the Ugg Crazies would try to throw like an unstable mutation and then drop berserks and stuff, that's when I would like toss the bolt and try to get that card advantage there. And it's also used really often for killing Mishra's factories, which basically gives you like another land destruction. Because if you've got Stone Rains and you've got Sinkholes and you've got bolts for factories, then that's an awful lot of lands you've killed, and all your discs are blowing up all their artifact mana as well. So then I also put a couple fireballs in, because there are times where you need to get a little bit more damage through late game. But you know, most of the time what I find is when I'm doing games against other creature decks, the fireball gets split into a couple pieces. It ends up doing like 2 damage here, 2 damage here, and taking out like 2 of their creatures. And the 2-for-1 at almost any time in old school is fantastic. And you get 2-for-1s all the time with fireballs. So that's how they usually get used. Now for the bit more mass removal. Of course, since this is a mid-range deck, the budget increased more than the normal budget decks. So Chaos Orb is one of those splurges. And again, for any of you, if you play old school, get a Chaos Orb. It's the best, even though it's like we play it differently and you only hit 1 card, it's still the best removal in the whole format. It's fantastic. So definitely go get a Chaos Orb. Now that's an answer for anything basically. And now you got the Nevinrral's discs, which is really the reason for the name of the deck. And a lot of people I see misplay the Nevinrral's disc. The point is not to set the disc in play and then just blow the disc. What you want to do is you want to put the disc down on the table and then just keep it there and just keep pushing your opponent into a corner. That's generally what you want to do with Nevinrral's disc, especially when you got stuff like Hypnotic Specters, right? Because when you put the disc in play, your opponent tends to not want to play their cards onto the table because they're all just going to get blown up. And once that disc is untapped, you're ready to blow that thing like at any moment. So you get a disc on the table, you keep a mana open, and then you keep your opponent holding their cards in their hands while you just keep on like pushing those little points through and limiting their mana options and stuff. So anyways, the discs are just fantastic. They answer so much stuff. And another thing that I put in there is the mass creature removal can be a really big deal. And many times when you're going, trying to get this all centered here so people can see it. When you're trying to go up against control decks, oftentimes like your disc is going to get blown up. Many things are going to get blown up. And since you're playing an aggressive deck with creatures and bolts and things like that, very often they're already at lower life than I actually am. And so Pestilence is a really good answer that I've got for something like that. Because like against a control deck, you know, if I'm playing aggro against them, their life is probably lower than mine. And I can just use the Pestilence to just bring everyone's life down until they eventually lose. But it's also used for good removal if the discs don't make it into play, to blow those off the table. And of course, regenerating creatures can survive a Pestilence, because you can Pestilence and kill everything, and then you can just regenerate your creatures and keep yours around, which keeps the Pestilence in play, because as soon as the creatures are gone, the Pestilence goes away. Another thing about it is I've had times where I've killed all the creatures in play and just my Mishra's factories are left around. And so before the end of every turn, I'm activating a mana to keep the Pestilence in play. And so what I'll generally do, like that's like against like a control deck, I'll start my turn, untap my lands, and then I'll do some damage with Pestilence, you know, just bring them down a couple notches. And then at the end of my turn, activate the factory, right? Or like maybe during the attack step, like activate the factory and swing and punch them in the face or something like that. And then at the end of like their turn, activate the factory again right at the end, just so I can just keep that Pestilence on the table. So it's just good removal. These might sometimes be one of the first ones that gets sideboarded out, depending on what you're going against, and especially if they're just not seeming to be very effective against the deck that you're going to play. Now, of course, since you have access to black, there's a couple cards you're just going to have to play. So Mind Twist and Demonic Tutor, those are definitely a couple of them. They're just gonna have to play for sure. There we go. Get those set so people can see them. So Mind Twist, when that card comes out, it just wins games. It's just so fantastic. It just knocks their whole hand right out of their hand, and so many times that just ends the game. And Demonic Tutor is like your answer all. Just go get whatever card you need the absolute most. I've got a Wheel of Fortune in there because if I'm sitting there limiting their mana, blowing up all their resources, then oftentimes it's safe for me to wheel because even though I'm giving them a full hand of cards as well, I'm going to get a lot more gas because I've actually got the mana to actually play it. And so it's a good kind of come back from behind kind of spells, what it basically is in this deck. If I'm winning and controlling them, I'm generally not going to wheel. It's when I've had a hard time keeping up and my hand is really limited, but I'm probably blowing up their lands because that's what my deck actually does. So the wheel just gives me another big breath of air so I can try to run at them again. Now the next ones is I've got a couple forks in the deck. And the forks, they serve many purposes. Oftentimes they just duplicate up whatever it is I need to do. So what seems to happen most of the time is it'll be like a lightning bolt and a fork, to kill 2 creatures on the table. Or I'll cast a Demonic Tutor and a fork to go get 2 cards that I really need badly. But another one that sometimes happens is let's say I really want to make sure my disc resolves, right? So I'll cast my disc, and then they'll counterspell it, and then I'll fork the counterspell, and then to turn it into a counterspell and target their counterspell. That's a really good one. So you can basically use fork like a counterspell for red, and so I can actually use that to power out some of my cards sometimes, and so that's actually been really useful. And let's see. So now for my mana base, let me get all the main spells out of the way. Now, obviously, I'm going to have some basic lands in this, and just red and black. So there's 3 red and 5 black lands, and that's largely because I have more early game double black spells than I have more early game double red spells, like with the Sinkholes and the Hypnotic Specters. A lot of the red stuff I have is only 1 red, and so I don't need that red as desperately that early on. I only need 1 pretty early on. And also for another sideboard card, you'll see why I've got more black than red. Then I've got the 4 Strip Mines, of course. So this deck is obviously Eternal Central rules, where you allow 4 Strip Mines. And then a little bit of speed, just a Soul Ring. And yes, the disc will blow this up, but Soul Ring gives so much speed that even if it comes out and only works for a couple of turns before it gets blown up, it was worth it, oftentimes. Because you can get that advantage just so fast. Then the Mishra's Factories. Because the factories are a really good way to survive a disc and just keep punching your opponent in the face, or just have some defense out, when they wrath or something like that. Just factories in old school. You don't need to explain it. They're so good. Everyone realizes it. Okay, now for the multicolor lands, I've got 3 Cities of Brass. I didn't want to go any higher than 3 because they just definitely start to hurt you, and that whole Pestilence plan gets worse. You're like a clock ticking down when you're a City of Brassing yourself. So these are only in here out of necessity because you don't have fetches and things like that. So there's those. And then here's the Badlands. Of course, now, again, since this is the mid-range deck, that budget increased, and that main 2 places that the budget went was the set of dual lands and then the Chaos Orb, with the 2 big cards that I win for to increase the budget. Sorry, I still have a cold. And to stretch for. Now you can also see that this one card is signed. That's actually one of my subscribers actually signed that and sent it to me. So thank you, Alec. God bless you, man. So every time that card comes out, I think of you. So anyways, a little special thing there. Okay, so that's the deck. That's the full 60. Now what about the sideboard? Now since you're going to go budget, there's a lot of things I just can't use. I'm not going to be packing in Nether Void and the Abyss and things like that. But Blood Moon is just fantastic. And Blood Moon single-handedly will just win games against many decks. And you can get cheaper versions of these from Chronicles that are only 12 to 14 bucks or something like that. And since I've got the Blood Moons, now you see why I've got the 5 swamps and only 3 mountains. Because if I play a Blood Moon and then all of my Mishra's Factories, my my strip mines and my city brass and my Badlands, they all turn into mountains, and I don't have an awful lot of black sources. So that's why I needed to push the black up a little bit higher. So I might actually pull the Sinkholes out of the deck if I put the Blood Moons in to go against a control deck, just because the black is a little harder to access. But but Blood Moon is just so big. I mean, like I said, against a lot of decks, you play Blood Moon and you win, like right there, because they just can't deal with it, right? So that's the first sideboard card. Now, of course, if you're playing red, you got to have the red elemental blasts, because they're just so effective against any deck with blue. You can just win a counter war so much more easily, blow those permanents right off the table. They're just fantastic. So enough said, right? Gotta go for the red elemental blasts. Now, as you saw, there are indeed some decks I've got. Some small creatures I've got that they're not going to compete with, like Urnam and Jazam and things like that. I'm going to have to get a disc in play and blow it, or I have to throw 2 bolts or something at a Jazam and take it off the table. So what I've got there is I put a couple of Maze of Iths in the sideboard, because if I go against a deck that's got some real beefy creatures that I really need to deal with, then the Maze of Ith is just fantastic, because I can keep their creature at bay until I can get a disc in play, and then once I've got that disc in play, I can blow the disc, clear the board, and the Maze of Ith is still out there in play, just to keep throwing them back on their heels. So in case I go against a good control deck with white, or just a white weenie deck, I've got Glooms that I can play. And Gloom is just fantastic, making all those white spells cost more. Now, this is a good anti-white spell to play because I'm playing land destruction, right? I've got Sinkholes, Stone Rain, Strip Mines, all that. So if I'm playing Glooms as well, if I'm blowing up their lands and playing Gloom on them, they're stuck, right? They can't recover from that. Now the last one is some Shatterstorms. Now I realize I've already got the discs, I've already got the Chaos Orb, but what happens a lot of times is you're going against those really good counter decks, and they've just seem like they've always got a counter ready. They've always got an ability to shut that down. And your discs don't quite resolve because they might blow them off the table or something like that, or they disenchant them, and so even if they don't counter them, they disenchant them when they actually hit the table. And you can bleed them out of counters, but that doesn't bleed them out of their disenchants, and I don't have a lot of enchantments for them to target to begin with. So if I'm going up against a really artifact-heavy deck, then I'm probably going to put in the Shatterstorms to make sure that they resolve, and I can effectively blow all the mana rocks and other mana tools off the table. So that's it. That is the red-black deck, and yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. And what's going to come up right after this video is I have a one-on-one game where I play this deck against one of the guys that's been a subscriber in my channel for a really long time. A guy named Tyler, really cool guy, and he was playing the online game with me over his phone, and his internet bandwidth wasn't very good, so it was a little fuzzy on his side, but you can still see and enjoy the game. So thanks everyone for attending, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.